I learned something about silence that spring, how it can feel like fabric against skin, soft at first, then suffocating, how people mistake it for weakness when really it's just the sound of someone deciding which bridge to burn first. The restaurant looked different in daylight, smaller somehow. The brass fixtures I'd picked out myself, each one chosen during a weekend antiquing trip upstate, caught the afternoon sun through those floor-to-ceiling windows I'd fought the contractor over. He'd said they were impractical. Too much light, he'd warned. Too exposed. I'd insisted. Turned out we were both right. The hostess didn't recognize me. Why would she? I'd been gone 2 years, and I'd made sure to look like someone who disappeared into the kind of life that leaves no forwarding address. No makeup beyond a touch of mascara. Hair pulled back in a way that suggested I'd stopped caring about things like that. The dress was expensive once, maybe 3 seasons ago. Now it just looked tired. Do you have a reservation? Her smile was professionally warm, the kind of warmth that costs nothing and means less. No, I kept my voice soft, apologetic. I was hoping you might have something available, just me. She scanned her tablet with the kind of reluctance that told me she'd already decided I wasn't worth the effort. We're quite full today. There's a private event in the back room. She glanced up, reassessing. I might have something by the kitchen. That would be perfect. Thank you. The table was exactly where she'd implied, tucked near the swinging doors, close enough to hear the clatter of dishes and the sharp voices of line cooks navigating the lunch rush. It was the table we used to give to last-minute walk-ins, people without reservations or connections, people who didn't matter. I'd sat there once before, years ago, when this was just an empty shell of a building and I was trying to imagine what it could become. Marcus had been with me then, his hand warm against my back, his voice full of that infectious certainty that made impossible things feel inevitable. Picture it, he'd said. White tablecloths, candlelight, the kind of place where people celebrate the moments that matter. We'll make this work, Elena, I promise. Some promises have expiration dates. You just don't know it until you're standing in the ruins, reading the fine print. The menu was new, not the physical menu. Those were the Italian linen ones I'd sourced from a specialty supplier in Milan, before I knew what words like buyout and forced resignation meant. But the dishes were different. Marcus had always wanted to do more fusion, more trendy small plates. I'd fought for classic technique, food that felt like coming home. He'd won that argument eventually. He'd won all of them. A waiter appeared, young and handsome in the way that restaurants prefer. Can I get you something to drink? I could feel them watching from the back room, through the gauze, curtains, also my choice, white raw silk that filtered light like morning fog. I could see shapes moving, hear laughter, the particular pitch of people who believe they're celebrating something permanent. Just water, please. His expression flickered. Disappointment, maybe, or judgment. In a place like this, water meant you weren't planning to spend money. It meant you were taking up space that could go to someone who mattered. Sparkling or still? Still is fine. He disappeared. I let my eyes drift across the room, cataloging the changes. The art on the walls was new, abstract pieces in gold frames where my black and white photographs of Italian street markets used to hang. The music was different too. Electronic, minimal, cool. I'd always played jazz during lunch service. Billie Holiday, Chet Baker, voices that made people slow down and taste their food. The water arrived in one of my hand-blown glasses. I'd found them at a small studio in Vermont, driven 6 hours just to meet the artist. Each one was slightly different, imperfect in ways that made them precious. I wrapped my fingers around it and felt the familiar weight. Are you ready to order? The waiter's pen hovered over his pad, the universal signal of someone ready to move on. Could I have a few more minutes? Of course. But his smile said otherwise. I sipped my water and remembered the day I signed the papers. The lawyer's office had been cold, the air conditioning set to that specific temperature that makes you want to leave. Marcus hadn't looked at me once. His attorney did all the talking, terms like irreconcilable differences and mutual agreement floating through the air like smoke from a fire that had already burned down the house. You'll retain your initial investment, the attorney had said, sliding a check across the table. Plus the agreed-upon settlement. Mr. Chen will assume all operational control and ownership of Luminosa. Luminosa, Latin for bright one. I'd named it on a Tuesday morning, standing in this exact spot when it was still just exposed brick and dusty floors. Marcus had loved it. said it sounded expensive and intimate at the same time. He'd loved a lot of things I created, right up until he decided he loved them more without me. The laughter from the back room grew louder. I recognized some of the voices. David, who'd been my sous chef before Marcus promoted him to executive. Rachel, our manager, who'd testified in the arbitration that I'd been difficult to work with and resistant to change. And Marcus, of course. His laugh was the same, rich and confident, the sound of someone who'd never questioned whether he deserved good things. They were celebrating something, an anniversary maybe, or perhaps just the simple fact that they'd won. My phone buzzed, a text from James. "Everything's ready, just say the word." I typed back, "Not yet." The waiter returned. "Have you decided?" I ordered the special, Marcus's signature dish, duck breast, with cherry gastrique and microgreens, the kind of thing that photographed well but left you hungry an hour later. It arrived plated like art, each element positioned with tweezers, the sauce applied with an eyedropper. It tasted like I remembered, beautiful and hollow. I was finishing the last bite when the curtain to the private room pulled back. Marcus emerged first, his hand on the shoulder of a woman I didn't recognize. She was younger than me, blonde where I was dark, laughing at something he'd just said. Behind them came the others, David, Rachel, a few investors I recognized from the early days. They moved toward the front door in a cluster, that particular energy of people who'd had wine with lunch and felt invincible because of it. Marcus was mid-story, his hands gesturing widely when his eyes swept across the dining room and stopped. For a moment, maybe 3 seconds, maybe less, I saw something flicker across his face. Confusion first, then recognition, then something else, something that looked almost like fear before he smoothed it away. Elena. My name sounded strange in his mouth, foreign. I set down my fork carefully, smiled. "Hello, Marcus." The group had stilled. Rachel's expression went carefully blank. David looked between us like he was watching a car accident happen in slow motion. "What are you doing here?" Marcus tried to make it sound casual, friendly even, but I heard the edge underneath. "Having lunch. The duck is lovely. You must be proud." He moved closer to my table, and I could smell his cologne. Different than what he used to wear. Everything about him was different now. The suit was more expensive, the watch was new. Even his posture had changed, expanded somehow, like he'd grown into space I used to occupy. "I didn't know you were back in the city." "I've been back for a while, just keeping quiet." "Right, well, it's good to see you." The lies sat between us like something solid. "You look well." I didn't. I'd made sure of that. But I smiled and said, "Thank you, so do you. Business must be good." "It is, really good actually. We just finalized the deal for the expansion. Second location in Brooklyn, third one planned for next spring." He couldn't help himself, the pride leaking through. "It's everything we talked about." Everything I talked about, I thought, but I just nodded and took another sip of water. The blonde woman appeared at his elbow. "Marcus, the car's here." "Right, yes." He looked at me again, and this time I saw something else. Guilt, maybe, or just the discomfort of being reminded that success stories always have footnotes. "Take care of yourself, Elena." "I will." They left in a wave of expensive fabric and louder than necessary laughter. The kind of laughter that's meant to prove something. Rachel threw one last glance over her shoulder, her eyes narrow with something that might have been concern or might have been triumph. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. The waiter cleared my plate. "Can I get you anything else? Dessert? Coffee?" "No, thank you. Just the check, please." He returned with a small leather folder. I opened it, pulled out my credit card, the one with my maiden name, Elena Torres, the name I'd gone back to after the divorce, the name that appeared on exactly 0 documents related to this restaurant. Or so they thought. I signed the receipt, added a generous tip, and stood. The afternoon sun had shifted, falling through those floor-to-ceiling windows at a different angle now, turning everything golden and warm, like the moment before sunset when the whole world looks like it's been dipped in honey. I walked past the bar, past the waiting area with its velvet benches and fresh flowers, past all the small perfect details I'd chosen back when I still believed love was the same thing as partnership. Outside, the city moved around me with indifferent velocity. Cars and pedestrians and delivery trucks all playing their part in the endless choreography of urban life. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the spring air fill my lungs, and pulled out my phone. "James, it's time." "You sure?" I'm sure. Okay, give me 30 minutes. I'll have everything ready for the board meeting. I hung up and started walking. Not away, never away. Just around the block, past the familiar storefronts and the coffee shop on the corner, past the dry cleaner and the pharmacy and all the small ordinary businesses that make a neighborhood feel like home. When I returned to the restaurant, there was a black town car parked out front. James stood beside it, holding a leather portfolio, his silver hair catching the light. He'd been my father's attorney for 30 years before he became mine. He knew things about loyalty that people like Marcus had never learned. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready?" We walked in together. The hostess looked up, her professional smile already forming, then faltering when she saw James. He had that effect, the particular authority of someone who'd spent decades in rooms where decisions got made. "We're here for the ownership meeting," James said pleasantly. "Conference room?" I'm sorry, what meeting? I don't have anything on the calendar." "It's all right." I kept my voice gentle. "Is Marcus still here? Mr. Chen? I think he's in the office, but I can't just..." "You can." I met her eyes. "Tell him Elena Torres is here with her attorney. Tell him we need to discuss the Castellano Holdings acquisition." The color drained from her face. One moment, please." She disappeared toward the back. James and I waited, standing in the afternoon light that poured through my windows, surrounded by the carefully curated elegance I'd dreamed into existence. "How does it feel?" James asked quietly. "Ask me later." Marcus appeared within 2 minutes. His face flushed, his earlier confidence replaced by something that looked like panic, wrapped in confusion. "Elena, what's this about? What acquisition? Should we talk here, or would you prefer the office?" "I don't understand. What are you..." "The office, then." I started walking, not waiting for permission, past the dining room, through the kitchen where line cooks paused mid-chop to stare, down the narrow hallway to the office that used to be half mine. Marcus followed, James behind him. When we were all inside, James closed the door and opened his portfolio. "Perhaps we should start at the beginning," James said, his tone mild but unmistakably authoritative. "Do you know who owned this building before you signed your lease, Mr. Chen?" Marcus's eyes darted between us. "The Castellano Group, some holding company. We dealt with their property management firm." "Correct, the Castellano Group, which, as of 18 months ago, became a wholly owned subsidiary of Torres Property Holdings." James pulled out a document. "Which is solely owned by Miss Torres, who inherited it from her late grandfather, Alfonso Castellano, 6 months before your divorce was finalized." I watched Marcus's face as the pieces started falling into place. The color, the understanding, the slow, creeping horror of realizing you've been playing a game without knowing all the players. But you never said... You told me your family had money, but you didn't... "I didn't access it," I said softly. "When we started this place, I wanted to build it ourselves. I thought that mattered. Partnership, equality, all those words we used when we were planning our future. Elena, When my grandfather died, I inherited everything. The buildings, the properties, the portfolio he'd spent 50 years building, including this one. The building you're standing in right now. I let that settle. I could have told you, probably should have, but we were already falling apart by then, and I thought maybe keeping it separate was smarter." James placed another document on the desk. "When Miss Torres signed the divorce settlement, she accepted your buyout of her operational share of the restaurant. The business became entirely yours, but the building remained hers. Your lease comes up for renewal in 60 days, I continued. The one you signed with Castellano Group Property Management, which now answers to me." Marcus sank into his chair, the leather one we'd picked out together at an estate sale, back when finding the perfect office chair felt like an adventure instead of a negotiation. "You're going to evict me." "No." I pulled over the other chair and sat down, taking my time. "I'm going to offer you a choice." "What kind of choice?" James handed him a folder. "In here, you'll find 2 options. Option 1, we renegotiate your lease at current market rates, which, given the neighborhood development over the past 2 years, would triple your monthly rent. You'd also need to pay retroactive increases for the below-market rate you've been enjoying, with interest. My calculations put that around $400,000. Marcus's hand shook as he opened the folder. I can't afford that. You know I can. Option 2, I said quietly, is that you sell the business back to me. I'll pay fair market value based on an independent appraisal. You walk away with enough to start over somewhere else, somewhere that isn't built on a foundation I paid for. This is extortion. This is business. I kept my voice level. You wanted this restaurant more than you wanted our marriage. You went to arbitration, had our employees testify that I was the problem, forced me out of something we built together. You won, Marcus. You got exactly what you wanted. So this is revenge. I considered that. Looked around the office at the photos on the walls. Photos he'd replaced mine with, images of his own choosing, his own vision. No, this is clarity. You taught me something important. That love and partnership are different things. That people will take what they can get and call it fair. I gave you a settlement. You gave me a fraction of what my work was worth and called it generous. I leaned forward. I'm doing the same thing. I'm giving you a choice that seems fair, but really isn't. I'm letting you walk away with your dignity mostly intact, while I take back what was mine all along. James checked his watch. The lease renewal notice goes out tomorrow. You have 72 hours to decide which option you prefer. After that, we proceed with option 1 by default. And if I fight this, take you to court, you'll lose. James's smile was pleasant and absolute. The ownership documents are ironclad. The lease terms are standard. And frankly, Mr. Chen, you don't have the resources for a prolonged legal battle, not when your cash flow depends on a lease you can't afford. I stood, smoothed down my dress, the one that looked tired and old because I'd wanted them to see me as defeated, as someone who'd given up and faded away into whatever life comes after failure. I didn't come back to destroy you, I said. I came back because I got tired of pretending it didn't hurt, tired of being the woman who quietly disappeared while you got to keep everything we built. So I'm taking it back, not with anger, not with chaos, just with the simple truth that some things were always mine, even when you convinced yourself they weren't. Marcus looked up at me, and for a moment I saw him as he'd been years ago, younger, uncertain, full of dreams that didn't include betrayal. I loved you. I know, but you love this more. I gestured around the office, the restaurant beyond. And that's okay. People make choices, but they don't get to make them consequence-free. We left him there, sitting in the leather chair, surrounded by papers that detailed exactly how thoroughly he'd miscalculated. The hostess watched us leave with wide eyes, and I knew by tomorrow every employee would understand that the woman who ordered water and sat by the kitchen was the same woman whose name was on the deed, the tax documents, the ownership papers they'd never thought to question. Outside, the late afternoon had turned to early evening. The city was shifting into its nighttime rhythm, lights beginning to glow in windows, people heading home or out to dinner or